So our last question is a big monster of a thing, so let's get stuck in. Luigi and Alfredo run in a 10-kilometer race, and Luigi's average speed was x kilometers per hour. Alfredo's average speed was 0.5 kilometers per hour slower than Luigi's average speed. Luigi took 10 over x hours to run the race. And I want to know an expression for the time Alfredo took to run the race. Well, if Luigi's average speed was x, this whole question's got to revolve around speed, distance, and time, right? So speed equals distance over time. I want to know how long he took to run the race. So we want to rearrange this formula, saying time equals distance over speed. So Luigi's time is 10 over x. This makes sense because, of course, it's a 10-kilometer race and he's running at a speed x. Alfredo's speed was 0.5 kilometers per hour slower than Luigi's speed. So for Alfredo's speed, his speed is x minus 0.5. And so therefore the time he took to run the race, he's running the same distance of 10, but his time is x minus 0.5. And that's the first part of the question. Alfredo took 0.25 hours longer than Luigi to run the race. And now we get a question that says, show that 2x squared minus x minus 40 equals 0. Now this seems to come out of nowhere, and it's very important in problem-solving questions to focus on what you know and what you're told, rather than where you're being asked to get to. So let's have a look at what we know. Luigi took 10 over x hours to run the race. Now Alfredo took a bit longer. So if we were to add 0.25 hours to Luigi's time, that would give us Alfredo's time. And we wrote an expression for that, that's 10 over x minus 0.5. So that's Luigi's time over there. Add a little bit, and you get Alfredo's time. Now I have an equation and I want to work towards solving it. It's an equation involving fractions, so by this stage we know what to do. Every term gets multiplied by every denominator. That is x and x minus 0.5 on each term. Don't skip this step, it's a very easy step to make a mistake on. And even if you understand the principle, it's worth just doing your accounting very carefully here. Following this down to the next line, I've got 10 times x minus 0.5 plus 0.25x, x minus 0.5 equals 10x. By this stage, we're ready to multiply out brackets. 10x minus 5 plus 0.25x squared minus 0.25 times 0.5 is 0.125x equals 10x. Now this is looking like a quadratic, so I'm going to do the thing I usually do, which is organize this quadratic in a form ready to solve. That is 0.25x squared. That's my squared term. I've then got 10x on both sides. If I bring this 10x over, it will become negative and they'll cancel each other out, leaving behind the minus 0.125x term. And then I've got my minus 5, and that equals 0. Now at this stage, I've got my quadratic organized and ready to solve, but it doesn't look much like their quadratic. Their quadratic has whole numbers and mine is full of decimals. Now 0.125 is 1/8 and 0.25 is 1/4. If I multiply this whole equation by 8, all of my decimals are going to go away. And if you didn't know that 0.125 is an eighth, that's fine, just type it into your calculator and your calculator will convert it to a fraction 1/8 and that'll give you what you need. Remember that when we multiply through an equation to get rid of our fractions, we're essentially scaling it up. And here I'm going to scale it up again to get rid of my decimals. Every term I'm going to times by 8, because that's going to make every one of these decimals into whole numbers. So 0.25 times 8 is 2x squared. An eighth, 0.125 times 8 comes out as 1x. 5 times 8 is 40, so that's a minus 40, and that's equal to 0. So this is definitely one of the most complicated steps to take on this worksheet, but hopefully that makes sense. Now, we've got to use the quadratic formula to solve this equation. And once again, as I said before, we have to be very careful with minus signs going into any formulas, but especially the quadratic. Here, a equals 2, b equals minus 1, and c equals minus 40. And if you don't put brackets around that minus 1 when you substitute it into your quadratic formula, your answer will be incorrect. Whenever a negative number gets substituted into a formula, you put brackets around it. So I'm going to go ahead and substitute that into my formula. I showed previously what this would look like on the page, and I'm not going to repeat that work. I'm going to go straight ahead and put those numbers in, and I'm going to get 4.73 and I'm also going to get minus 4.23. So I've solved my equation and given my answers correct to 2 decimal places. Now we need to work out the time that Luigi took to run the 10-kilometer race, giving our answer in hours and minutes, correct to the nearest minute. So Luigi took 10 over x hours to run the race. 10 over x is equal to 10 over 4.73. As far as this part of the question goes, I can ignore the negative answer, because this would result in a negative time, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. We do need to keep both answers for part 2 of the question, because we need 2 answers over here, but in this interpretation part of the question, we need to think about what these answers represent. So 10 over 4.73, if I type that into my calculator, I'm going to get an answer in hours. And that answer is going to be 2.114 hours. Now that's 2 hours and some number of minutes. If I take the 0.114 and times it by 60, I'll get my minutes. So that's 2 hours and 0.114 times 60 gets me 6.84 minutes. So we'd say 7 minutes. And that 7 over there came from doing 0.114 times 60 and rounding to the nearest minute. Remember as well, we can also do this using the time key on the calculator. That's the key with the point and the commas on it. So what I would do over here is type in 2.114, press the equals key, and then I would press the time key. And if we do that, our answer is going to look something like this. We're going to get 2, a little circle up here, 6 and a comma, and then 50.4 and a double comma. This is the hours, this is the minutes, and this is the seconds. 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 50.4 seconds. So of course, 2 hours and minutes to the nearest minute, we'd say 2 hours and 6 minutes and 50 seconds, while the closest minute is 7 minutes. And that's all the answers to our quadratics and fractions worksheet.